Hello, this is Dan Richardson from the Chapel of the North Hills, and we're going to talk today about getting mad and getting even. We hear a lot of times that phrase, don't get mad, get even. And let's consider someone who got mad and attempted to get even. So, in the movie The Amazing Spider-Man 2, we see that Peter Parker, before he got bitten by this radioactive spider, he was a nice guy. And after he got bitten by the radioactive spider, he developed all these stronger, faster sensitivities, and he had a lot of these powers, and he was still a nice guy. His powers didn't seem to change his personality. But for Max Dillon, that was not the case. Max Dillon was a nice guy, and he tried to help his best to help everybody. He was capable, but he was constantly overlooked. He was always undervalued. He seemed to be an invisible person, even though he was always trying hard. Well, however, one day when he was repairing an electrical system at Oscorp, he was struck by this surge of electricity. And he developed, because of that, the power to generate electricity and vast amounts of electricity. And with this new power, his personality changed. He was overcome with a desire for revenge. Well, first thing we need to realize is that the desire for revenge can turn you into a monster. Most of us remember that verse that says, love your neighbor as yourself. You realize that that is only the second half of a verse? That's part of the great commandment, and that's the part that Jesus quoted. We hear that part a lot, but it's the second half of the verse from Leviticus 19:18. That verse starts with telling us not to hold grudges or desire revenge. It says, you will not take vengeance or bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love the neighbor as your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Another thing that we need to realize about the desire for revenge is that it actually puts you in the place of God. When you desire revenge, you are taking something that belongs to God and assuming that responsibility yourself. See, none of us is actually capable of getting even. We can't make things even. We overreact. We think it might even the scales on our side, but the other party will feel like now they have been slighted and they have to retaliate, and it goes back and forth and escalates over and over. One of the people will always feel like they get the worst deal. So the only way for things to be even is to let God handle the situation. This is a principle in the Old Testament that is said again in the New Testament, not once, but twice. Deuteronomy 32:35 says, vengeance is mine and recompense. Their foot shall slip in due time, for the day of calamity is at hand, and things come to hasten upon them. And then in Romans 12:19, Paul quotes that same passage. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. Not only there, but later the author of Hebrews in 10:30 also quotes that same passage where it says, vengeance is mine, I will repay. So when something is said in the Bible 3 times, we know it is extremely important, and it's a very big thing for us to remember. We cannot assume the place of God, because that will lead us to a further step. The desire for revenge will actually lead us to oppose God. The religious leaders of Jesus' day were really threatened by his popularity, and they were quite insulted when Jesus denounced them publicly. They wanted revenge. This led them to using their political advantage to get Jesus arrested and eventually executed, as we know. They remembered Jesus' teachings and about being raised on the 3rd day, and so they took extra steps to make sure that no one would ever follow Jesus again. We read the story in Matthew 27, starting in verse 62. On the next day, which followed the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered together to Pilate, saying, "Sir, we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, 'After 3 days I will rise.' Therefore, command that the tomb be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away, and say to the people, 'He is risen from the dead,' and the last deception will be greater than the first." Well, we know that their plan backfired. First of all, the disciples weren't even thinking about what Jesus was teaching when he was saying that he would come back from the dead. And secondly, after Jesus did raise from the dead, just like he said, and the tomb was empty after all. The Jewish leaders then had to go to their plan B. They had to pay off the soldiers to spread propaganda that the disciples had stolen the body. Matthew 28, verses 11. Now while they were going, behold, some of the guard came into the city and reported to the chief priests all the things that had happened. When they assembled with the elders and consulted together, they gave a large sum of money to the soldiers, saying, "Tell them his disciples came away while we were asleep, and stole him away while we slept. And if this reaches the governor's ears, we will appease him and make you secure." So they took the money and they did what they were instructed. And this saying is commonly reported among the Jews to this day. Well, the saddest part of this story is that these religious leaders actually knew the truth that Jesus was resurrected. Otherwise, they would have been able to stop Christianity dead in its tracks, so to speak. All they had to do was roll out the corpse. All they had to do is produce the body of Jesus, and they could have stopped all the rumors that Jesus was resurrected. But they could not produce that body because they didn't have it. The disciples didn't steal it. They weren't able to make it secure. Jesus simply was resurrected, and he walked out of that tomb. This desire for revenge had twisted them so much that they kept being God's enemies. They kept being against God, even though they knew for sure that it was real, that Jesus raised from the dead. Well, let's not make that mistake. Let's let God handle all the revenge and let God make things even as only he can. And in the meantime, let's just love everyone and continue to spread that gospel that Jesus is alive, that the tomb is empty, and that he ever lives to make intercession for us. Be blessed.